The city lights of Manhattan sparkled against the dark evening sky as Marcus Chen sat alone at his regular corner table in Le Bernardin, one of New York's most exclusive restaurants. His perfectly tailored Tom Ford suit and Patek Philippe watch, worth more than most people's homes, couldn't mask the emptiness in his dark brown eyes. At 45, Marcus had achieved what most would consider the epitome of success. His tech company, Innovad Tech Solutions, had revolutionized artificial intelligence in healthcare, making him worth $4.2 billion. Yet on this particular Wednesday evening in October, he felt like the poorest man in New York. The waiter approached with a bottle of Chateau Lafite Rothschild 1982, Marcus's usual choice. "Will anyone be joining you tonight, Mr. Chen?" The waiter asked politely, though he already knew the answer. Marcus shook his head slightly, his gaze fixed on the empty chair across from him. Just 3 months ago, his wife of 18 years, Victoria, had finalized their divorce. The tabloids had a field day with the news, splashing headlines about the tech billionaire's failed marriage across every newspaper and gossip website. What hurt more than the public humiliation was the distance that had grown between him and his children, 15-year-old Emma and 17-year-old James. As he sipped his wine, Marcus's phone buzzed. It was a text from James. "Can't make it to dinner this weekend. Have a game." Short, cold, and distant, just like their relationship had become. Marcus knew the game excuse was just that, an excuse. His son hadn't wanted to spend time with him since the divorce. The restaurant's ambient noise faded into the background as Marcus's mind wandered to how he'd reached this point. 10 years ago, when Innovad Tech was just starting, he'd been a different man. He remembered the excitement of working late nights with his small team, the thrill of their first breakthrough, and Victoria bringing dinner to his office, proud of his dedication and vision. Success had come quickly after that. Their AI medical diagnosis system had caught the attention of major hospitals, and within 3 years, Innovad Tech had gone public. The IPO had made Marcus a billionaire overnight. He bought the penthouse overlooking Central Park, upgraded their lifestyle, and thrown himself even deeper into work, convinced he was securing his family's future. What he hadn't noticed was how he'd stopped having breakfast with his children, how he'd missed James's first basketball championship and Emma's piano recitals, how Victoria's proud smile had slowly transformed into disappointed silence. A couple at a nearby table caught his attention. They were sharing a dessert, laughing at some private joke. The woman's genuine smile reminded him of Victoria in their early days, before the money, before the endless board meetings, before he'd chosen his empire over his family. Marcus pulled out his phone again, opening his photo gallery. He scrolled back several years to find the last family vacation they'd taken to the Maldives. Emma was 11 then, building sandcastles with Victoria, while James, 13 at the time, tried to learn surfing. Marcus had spent most of that trip on conference calls, promising to join them in just 5 minutes, promises that stretched into hours. The waiter returned with his usual order, Wagyu beef with truffle sauce, but Marcus barely tasted it. The food at Le Bernardin was exceptional, yet lately, everything seemed bland, as if his taste buds, like his life, had lost their sensitivity to joy. His phone buzzed again. This time it was an email from his executive assistant about tomorrow's board meeting. There was a crisis with the new AI update, something about the algorithm showing unexpected errors. A year ago, this would have sent him rushing back to the office. Tonight, he just stared at the screen, feeling oddly detached. The truth was, Marcus Chen, the man who had solved complex technological problems and built a billion-dollar company from scratch, couldn't figure out how to fix his own life. His success had become a golden cage, and somewhere along the way, he'd locked himself inside. As he paid his bill and stood to leave, Marcus caught his reflection in the restaurant's window. He saw what everyone else saw, a successful Asian American businessman, powerful, wealthy, envied. But beneath that polished exterior was a man who had everything and nothing at the same time. Walking out into the cool October air, Marcus loosened his tie slightly. Tomorrow would be another day of meetings, decisions, and business deals. But for the first time in his life, the man who had always known exactly what he wanted felt completely lost. Little did he know, life was about to send him an unexpected lesson in what truly mattered, and it would come from the most unlikely teacher. Sarah Thompson hurried through the busy kitchen of Le Bernardin, balancing 3 plates of perfectly arranged dishes. At 32, she had mastered the art of elegant service, even though her feet ached from the double shift she was working. Her honey blonde hair was neatly tied back, and despite her exhaustion, her warm smile never faltered. "Table 7 needs their wine topped up," called out Miguel, her fellow server, as she passed by. Sarah nodded, mentally adding it to her growing list of tasks. She hadn't planned on working a double shift today, but when Jenny called in sick, Sarah couldn't refuse. Every extra dollar counted, especially with her mother's medical bills piling up. The evening rush was in full swing when she noticed him, the Asian man in the expensive suit sitting alone at table 12. Sarah had seen many wealthy people during her 6 years at Le Bernardin, but something about his expression caught her attention. Behind the carefully maintained exterior, she recognized a familiar kind of sadness. Walking past his table, she watched as he fumbled with his phone, accidentally knocking it off the table. Without hesitation, Sarah swooped in to help, picking up the device before it could slide under the neighboring table. "Here you go, sir," she said, holding out the phone. "Don't worry, the screen's not cracked." Marcus Chen looked up, startled by the genuine warmth in her voice. Most staff at Le Bernardin were professional but distant, especially with regular customers like him. But this waitress's smile reached her eyes, a detail he hadn't noticed in anyone for a long time. "Thank you," he replied, taking the phone. "I've been a bit distracted tonight." Sarah surprised herself by responding, "Sometimes being distracted isn't such a bad thing. It means we're human, not robots." The moment the words left her mouth, she worried she'd been too informal with a customer. But Marcus found himself chuckling, the first real laugh he'd had in weeks. "That's an interesting perspective," he said, looking at her name tag, Sarah. Just then, Sarah's attention was drawn to another table needing service. "Excuse me, sir. Enjoy your evening." She hurried off, leaving Marcus puzzled by their brief interaction. Later that evening, as the restaurant began to quiet down, Sarah was counting her tips in the break room when her phone rang. It was the hospital where her mother was receiving treatment for stage 3 breast cancer. "Miss Thompson, we're calling about your mother's upcoming treatment schedule," the administrative voice said. "There seems to be an issue with the payment plan." Sarah's heart sank. She had been working every extra shift possible, but the bills kept mounting. "I can make a payment tomorrow," she promised, knowing she'd have to dip into her community center savings again. Walking back into the dining room, Sarah noticed Marcus was still at his table, now staring at an untouched dessert. Without thinking, she stopped by his table. "That chocolate souffle is too good to let it go to waste," she said softly. Marcus looked up, surprised to see her again. "I suppose I'm not very good company for myself tonight," he admitted. "Would you like to hear today's special story that comes with the souffle?" Sarah asked, improvising. When he raised an eyebrow curiously, she continued, "Legend has it that this particular dessert has the power to turn any bad day into a bearable one, but it only works if you actually eat it." For the second time that evening, Marcus found himself smiling. "Is that scientifically proven?" "Oh, absolutely." Sarah played along, her eyes twinkling. "We have a whole research department dedicated to dessert therapy." Her playful response made something shift in Marcus's chest, a feeling of lightness he hadn't experienced in months. He picked up his spoon and took a bite of the souffle. "See, the research never lies," Sarah said, pleased to see him eating. As she turned to leave, Marcus spoke up. "Thank you, Sarah, not just for saving my phone, but for—" He paused, searching for the right words. "For showing kindness to a stranger." Sarah's face softened. "Sometimes strangers are just friends we haven't met yet," she replied, quoting something her mother always said. As she walked away to finish her closing duties, neither Sarah nor Marcus realized that this simple interaction would be the beginning of something extraordinary. Two people from completely different worlds, brought together by a dropped phone and a chocolate souffle, were about to embark on a journey that would change both their lives forever. Over the next few weeks, Marcus found himself returning to Le Bernardin more frequently than usual. Though he told himself it was because of the excellent food, his eyes would always search for Sarah's friendly face among the staff. She had become a small bright spot in his otherwise monotonous life. One quiet Tuesday evening, Marcus arrived earlier than his usual time. Sarah was arranging flowers at a nearby table when she noticed him. "Good evening, Mr. Chen," she greeted, using his name for the first time. Miguel mentioned you've been coming in more often lately. The food here is exceptional, Marcus replied, though his eyes lingered on her face a moment longer than necessary. As Sarah poured his usual wine, she noticed the dark circles under his eyes. Rough day? She asked gently. Marcus sighed, surprising himself by answering honestly. My daughter Emma refused to come to dinner again. She says she's too busy with school activities. Hut, he trailed off. But you know that's not the real reason, Sarah finished for him. Something in her understanding tone made Marcus want to continue talking. How did you become so insightful about people? He asked. Sarah smiled, adjusting her apron. When you're working to open a community center while taking care of a sick parent, you learn to read people pretty quickly. The mention of her personal life caught Marcus's attention. A community center? Sarah's eyes lit up as she spoke about her dream project. Yes, in the Bronx. There's this old building that used to be a library. I'm trying to turn it into a place where kids can come after school, where single parents can find resources, where the elderly can gather for company. Her passion was evident in every word. That's quite ambitious, Marcus remarked, genuinely impressed. It is, Sarah admitted. And with Mom's medical bills, it's taking longer to save up than I planned. But I'll get there eventually. Before Marcus could respond, Sarah was called away to another table, but her words stayed with him throughout his meal. Here was someone who had so little compared to him, yet was working to give back to others. Later that evening, as the restaurant quieted down, Sarah stopped by his table again. Would you like to hear about today's dessert therapy options? She asked with a playful smile, remembering their conversation from weeks ago. Instead of answering, Marcus asked, Why a community center? Sarah's expression turned thoughtful. When I was 12, my dad left us. Mom worked 3 jobs to keep us afloat. I spent a lot of time alone or in places I shouldn't have been. If there had been a safe space, somewhere to go after school. She paused. I want to create what I needed back then. The honesty in her voice touched something in Marcus. Here he was, worth billions, yet feeling empty, while this waitress with barely any resources was working to make a real difference. Tell me more about your plans, he said softly. Sarah glanced around the nearly empty restaurant, then sat down briefly at his table. She pulled out a worn notebook from her apron pocket and showed him rough sketches of her vision: study rooms, a small library, a kitchen for cooking classes, a computer lab. The building needs a lot of work, she explained, but the bones are good. I've been taking online courses in nonprofit management when I can. It's slow progress, but, she smiled, I believe it will happen someday. Marcus studied her face, seeing no trace of bitterness or resentment about her circumstances. And your mother? How is she doing? A shadow crossed Sarah's face, taking it day by day. The treatments are expensive, but she's fighting hard. She quickly brightened. She's the one who taught me that true wealth isn't in your bank account, it's in what you give back to others. The evening was ending, and Sarah needed to help close the restaurant. As she stood to leave, Marcus found himself saying, I'd like to hear more about your community center project sometime. Sarah's smile was genuine but measured. That's kind of you, Mr. Chen, but I'm not looking for handouts. This is something I need to build myself. As Marcus watched her walk away, he realized something had shifted inside him. For the first time in years, he felt a spark of purpose. Not because he wanted to rescue Sarah, her independence and determination made it clear she didn't need rescuing, but because she had unknowingly shown him what he had been missing in his life: genuine connection and meaningful purpose. That night, instead of heading home to his empty penthouse, Marcus sat in his car for a long time, thinking about community centers, second chances, and the unexpected ways life could change its course. The morning headlines on the New York Post screamed, Techie billionaires new waitress gold digger, or true Lovi? Accompanied by grainy photos of Marcus and Sarah talking at Le Bernardin, the article set off a storm of speculation across social media. Sarah first learned about it when her coworker Miguel rushed into the staff room, waving his phone. Sarah, you're on page 6. The other servers gathered around, their reactions a mix of excitement and concern. This is ridiculous, Sarah said, her hands shaking as she read the article. We've only ever talked at the restaurant. They're making it sound like you're trying to trap one of New York's most eligible billionaires. Miguel finished, squeezing her shoulder sympathetically. Meanwhile, across town in his office at Innovatech's headquarters, Marcus was dealing with his own fallout. His PR team had already received dozens of media requests, and his phone wouldn't stop buzzing with messages from business associates. "Marcus, what are you thinking?" demanded Richard Wam, his longtime business partner, storming into his office. "First the divorce, and now this? Our investors are nervous enough without you getting involved with a waitress." Marcus felt a surge of anger. "There's nothing to be involved in, Richard. Sarah is a hardworking person with more integrity than half the people in our board meetings." "That's not the point," Richard argued. "Perception is everything in our world. You know that." Back at Le Bernardin, Sarah's manager called her into his office. "Miss Thompson, while we respect our employees' private lives, we need to ensure this situation doesn't disrupt our restaurant's reputation." "I understand," Sarah replied quietly. "Would you like me to resign?" The manager shook his head. "No, you're one of our best servers. Just be discreet." That evening, when Marcus arrived for dinner, the atmosphere had changed. Other diners whispered and pointed, some even taking subtle photos with their phones. Sarah had been assigned to a different section, but she could feel eyes following her every move. During her break, Sarah stepped outside for some air and found Marcus waiting by the staff entrance. "I'm so sorry about this," he said, looking genuinely distressed. "I should have known they'd twist things." Sarah wrapped her arms around herself, fighting back tears. "My mom saw the article. She's worried sick now, thinking I'm being harassed by the media, as if she needed more stress." Marcus stepped closer, then stopped himself, aware that they might be photographed. "Let me help. I can have my PR team release a statement." "No," Sarah interrupted firmly. "That would only make it worse. Listen, Mr. Chen. Marcus, maybe it's better if you don't come to the restaurant for a while." The hurt in his eyes was visible. "Is that what you want?" "What I want?" Sarah laughed bitterly. "I want to be able to do my job without being called a gold digger. I want to focus on my community center plans without people questioning my motives. I want my mom to get better without worrying about tabloid stories." Before Marcus could respond, Sarah's phone buzzed. It was a text from her mother's nurse. "I have to go," she said, turning away. "Mom's not feeling well." "Sarah, wait." Marcus called after her. "At least let me drive you to the hospital." She paused, torn between her instinct to keep her distance and the genuine concern in his voice. "I can't. Don't you see? Every time we're seen together, it just feeds their story." Later that night, Marcus sat alone in his penthouse, staring at the city lights. His phone showed missed calls from his ex-wife Victoria, no doubt ready to lecture him about embarrassing the family, his children, probably mortified by the headlines, and various board members, concerned about company image. He opened his laptop and searched for information about the old library building in the Bronx that Sarah wanted to convert. Within minutes, he found it, a beautiful but deteriorating structure with so much potential, just like the dreams of the woman who wanted to transform it. Marcus realized he was at a crossroads. He could do what everyone expected, distance himself from Sarah, protect his image, maintain the status quo, or he could fight for something real, something that mattered more than stock prices and social standing. His phone buzzed again. This time it was a message from James, his son. "Dad, is it true? Are you dating a waitress?" Marcus stared at the message for a long time. Finally, he typed, "No, I'm getting to know an extraordinary person who happens to be a waitress, and she's teaching me more about life than any business deal ever has." He pressed send, knowing this was just the beginning of the storm they would have to weather. 2 months after the media frenzy began, Marcus sat in his therapist's office, something he'd never imagined doing before meeting Sarah. Dr. Rachel Foster watched as he paced the room, his usual composed demeanor cracking. "I keep waiting for the other shoe to drop," Marcus admitted. "Every time Sarah shows genuine care, there's this voice in my head saying it can't be real." "Like Victoria?" Dr. Foster asked gently, referring to his ex-wife. Marcus stopped pacing. "Victoria married a struggling entrepreneur. The moment I became successful, she changed. Or maybe I changed. Maybe I stopped trusting anyone who showed kindness." Across town, Sarah was facing her own battles. She sat beside her mother's hospital bed, holding her thin hand while reading angry comments on social media about her supposed gold-digging ways. "Don't let them hurt you, sweetheart," her mother, Linda, said weakly. "I've seen how that man looks at you. It's not about money for either of you." Sarah squeezed her mother's hand. "I'm scared, Mom. Not of the media or the gossip, but of feeling this way about someone who lives in such a different world." Just then, Sarah's phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. "Thinking of you and your mom. How was her treatment today?" A smile touched her lips, but before she could reply, another message came through, this time from an unknown number. It was Victoria Chen. "Meet me at the Plaza Hotel tomorrow at 2 p.m. We need to talk about Marcus." Sarah stared at the message, her heart racing. She hadn't told Marcus, but his ex-wife had been sending her messages for weeks, each one more insistent than the last. The next day, against her better judgment, Sarah went to the plaza. Victoria Chen sat at a corner table, looking exactly like her magazine photos, elegant, poised, and intimidating. "Thank you for coming," Victoria said coolly. "I'll be direct. Marcus is vulnerable right now. The divorce, his issues with the children. He's not thinking clearly." Sarah met her gaze steadily. "I'm not taking advantage of him." Victoria's laugh was sharp. "Oh, honey, I'm trying to protect you. Marcus has a pattern. He becomes intensely focused on something, or someone, and then, once the challenge is gone, he loses interest. I lived through it for 18 years. The words hit Sarah like physical blows, playing into her deepest insecurities. She left the plaza feeling shaken, her mind spinning with doubt. That evening at Le Bernardin, Marcus noticed something was wrong. Sarah's smile didn't reach her eyes, and she kept their interaction strictly professional. After her shift, he waited outside, determined to understand what had changed. "Sarah, please talk to me." She turned to face him, tears in her eyes. "Your ex-wife is right, isn't she? I'm just a temporary distraction from your real life." Marcus felt like he'd been punched. "You met with Victoria." "She helped me see reality," Sarah said quietly. "Look at us, Marcus. I serve dinner to people who spend more on one meal than I make in a month. I'm trying to build a community center while you build tech empires. We're from different worlds." "That's exactly why I need you in my life," Marcus said, stepping closer. "You remind me of who I used to be, before the money and success changed me. You see value in things I'd forgotten were important." Sarah wiped away a tear. "And what happens when that novelty wears off? When you remember that I can't fit into your world of galas and board meetings?" "My world?" Marcus laughed sadly. "My world is empty, Sarah. It's full of people who want something from me, who measure everything in dollars and shares. You're the first person in years who saw me as just a man, not a billionaire." They stood in silence, the New York traffic creating a backdrop to their personal crossroads. Finally, Sarah spoke. "I need time, Marcus, to figure out if I'm strong enough for this. To know if I'm ready to trust that this is real." Marcus felt fear grip his heart, the same fear of loss that had driven him to work obsessively, to push away his children, to build walls around his emotions. But this time, he chose a different response. "Take all the time you need," he said softly. "I'll be here. Not because you're a challenge or a novelty, but because you make me want to be better. And that terrifies me in the best possible way." As they parted ways that night, both Marcus and Sarah knew they were fighting not just against the world's judgment, but against their own demons. The question was, would their growing feelings be strong enough to win that battle? The call came during Sarah's lunch break at Le Bernardin. Her mother's doctor spoke in gentle but urgent tones. Linda's condition had worsened significantly, and she needed to start a new, more aggressive treatment immediately. The cost would be $175,000. Sarah sat in the staff room, her hands trembling as she looked at her bank account on her phone. Despite months of double shifts and saving every penny, she had nowhere near enough. The community center savings were almost gone, used for previous treatments. Marcus noticed something was wrong the moment he walked into the restaurant that evening. Sarah's eyes were red, and her usual warm smile was missing. When she nearly dropped a water pitcher, her hands shaking, he knew something serious had happened. "Sarah," he said softly, catching her attention. "What's wrong?" She tried to maintain her professional composure, but her voice cracked. "It's not a good time, Mr. Chen. Can I get you your usual wine?" Please talk to me, he insisted. During her break, Sarah finally told him about her mother's situation. Marcus immediately reached for his phone. I can have the money transferred to the hospital within an hour. But Sarah stepped back, shaking her head. I can't accept that. Why not? Marcus asked, genuinely confused. I have the means to help. Because this isn't about pride, Sarah explained, her voice steady despite her tears. It's about who I am, who my mother raised me to be. If I take your money now, it changes everything between us. How? I care about you, Sarah. Letting me help doesn't make you any less independent. Sarah looked at him directly. Doesn't it? Right now, when we talk, when we share moments, it's real. There's no debt between us, no obligation. If you pay for Mom's treatment, how will I ever know if I'm staying with you because of love or gratitude? Marcus fell silent, understanding hitting him hard. This wasn't about money. It was about dignity, about maintaining the authenticity that had drawn him to Sarah in the first place. Then let me help another way, he said finally. I know people at Memorial Sloan Kettering. They have clinical trials, research programs. Let me make some calls, not as a donor, but as someone who cares about you and your mother. Sarah hesitated, then nodded slowly. That kind of help, that I can accept. Over the next few days, Marcus worked tirelessly, making calls and arranging meetings. He found a promising clinical trial that Linda qualified for, one that would cover most of the treatment costs. The remaining amount was still substantial, but within reach if Sarah took out a loan. When Sarah went to the bank to apply for the loan, she was shocked to find her application rejected. Her credit score, though good, wasn't enough for such a large amount. That evening, she arrived at work to find Marcus waiting with a stack of papers. Before you say no, hear me out, he said quickly. This is a business proposal. The community center you want to build. Make it a proper non-profit organization. These papers show how you can apply for grants and funding. With your vision and determination, you could help not just kids in the Bronx, but expand to other neighborhoods. Sarah looked through the papers, seeing the potential. And my mother's treatment? The nonprofit could partner with healthcare organizations, creating programs for families dealing with serious illnesses. Your mother's case could be the pilot program. Everything completely legal and above board. Sarah studied his face. You did all this research? Marcus smiled softly. I learned from you that real help isn't about throwing money at problems. It's about finding solutions that let people keep their dignity. Tears filled Sarah's eyes, but this time they were different. You really see me, don't you? Not as someone to rescue, but as an equal. I see you as someone who's taught me more about strength and integrity than anyone I've ever known, Marcus replied. And if you'll let me, I want to keep learning from you. Standing in the quiet restaurant, Sarah made her choice. Not a choice about accepting help, but about accepting that love doesn't have to come with strings attached. That sometimes the strongest thing you can do is let someone walk beside you, supporting you while letting you find your own path. She took the papers and with them took a step toward a future where two people from different worlds could build something meaningful together, not through money or obligation, but through understanding, respect, and love. Let's do this, she said. Not just for Mom, but for all the families who need help. Marcus's smile showed that he understood exactly what this moment meant. It wasn't about him saving her. It was about them saving each other. 6 months had passed since Sarah's mother began her clinical trial treatment. The warm spring air drifted through the windows of Linda's hospital room, where Sarah was showing her mother the latest photos of the community center's renovation progress. The contractors finished the library section yesterday, Sarah explained, swiping through pictures on her phone. And look, Mom, the children's reading corner you designed is perfect. Linda's face, though tired from treatment, glowed with pride. Her condition had stabilized, and while recovery was still a long road ahead, there was hope in her eyes. It's really happening, isn't it, sweetheart? Meanwhile, across town, Marcus stood nervously outside his daughter Emma's school. He'd been attending her piano recitals regularly for the past few months, sitting quietly in the back, but today was different. Today, she had texted him asking to talk. Emma approached, her school backpack slung over one shoulder. At 15, she looked so much like her mother, but the uncertain smile she gave him was all his own. Dad, she said softly, you came. I'll always come when you call, Emma, he replied, fighting back emotion. Always. They walked to a nearby park, getting ice cream like they used to when she was little. Emma was quiet for a while, then suddenly spoke. I saw you at all my recitals. In the back row. Marcus nodded. I didn't want to pressure you, but I needed you to know I was there. Sarah told me, Emma said. When I ran into her at the hospital, I was visiting Mom's friend there, and Sarah was with her mother. She told me how you never miss a performance. Marcus was surprised. Sarah hadn't mentioned meeting Emma. She's different, isn't she? Emma continued. From Mom, from the other women after the divorce. She talked to me like a person, not like a billionaire's daughter. Yes, Marcus agreed. She has that gift. Emma took a deep breath. James is coming home from college next weekend. Maybe we could all have dinner together. Marcus felt his heart swell. I'd like that very much. That evening, Marcus arrived at the community center building where Sarah was overseeing the final touches on the library section. The old building was transforming beautifully, with fresh paint, new windows, and hope in every corner. He found her in what would become the computer lab, going over plans with the electrician. She looked tired but happy, her hair tied back messily, a smudge of paint on her cheek. Emma wants to have dinner, he said when they were alone. With me and James. Sarah's face lit up. Marcus, that's wonderful. She hugged him impulsively, then stepped back, blushing slightly. It's because of you, he said softly. You showed me that healing takes time and patience. That sometimes love means sitting in the back row, just being present. Sarah shook her head. No, it's because you learned to see what matters. Your children needed their father, not the billionaire CEO. They walked through the center together, their footsteps echoing in the half-finished rooms. Children's artwork already decorated some walls, drawings done by local kids who've been invited to dream about their future space. Mom's doctors are optimistic, Sarah said. The trial is working better than they expected. She's even talking about volunteering here when she's stronger, running art therapy sessions. Marcus watched as Sarah traced her fingers along a bookshelf they just installed. You know, he said, I used to think success meant bigger buildings, more zeros in my bank account. But this place, what you're building here, this is real success. Sarah turned to him, her eyes soft. We're building it together. All of us. Your children, my mother, the community. That's what makes it special. Just then, Sarah's phone buzzed with a text from James, Marcus's son. Hey Sarah, for the dinner with Dad, is it okay if I bring my girlfriend? She's dying to meet the woman who finally got through Dad's thick skull. They both laughed, the sound echoing through the empty rooms that would soon be filled with children's voices, dreams, and possibilities. As they stood there, surrounded by the physical manifestation of hope and healing, Marcus realized that true wealth wasn't in his business empire or his penthouse view. It was here, in this moment, watching Sarah's dreams come true while his own family slowly knit itself back together. Ready to go? Sarah asked, gathering her things. We got dinner plans to make. Marcus took her hand, marveling at how natural it felt now. Ready, he said, and he meant it in every way possible. The small chapel at Mount Sinai Hospital's recovery center was transformed with simple white flowers and soft candlelight. It wasn't the grand society wedding that New York's elite had expected from one of its wealthiest residents, but it was perfect for Marcus and Sarah. Linda Thompson sat in the front row, her face glowing with health and happiness. The experimental treatment had been successful, and though she still had regular checkups, she was strong enough to help 3 days a week at the now thriving community center. Emma and James stood together near their father, both serving as his attendants. James had his arm around his sister's shoulders, their past animosity forgotten. The past 2 years had healed many wounds in the Chen family. Sarah emerged from a side room, wearing a simple ivory dress that made her look radiant. Instead of a traditional wedding march, a group of children from the community center sang, What a Wonderful World, their gift to the woman who had changed their lives. As Sarah walked down the aisle, she remembered the day Marcus had proposed. It hadn't been at an expensive restaurant or exotic location. Instead, he had waited until they were at the community center, surrounded by laughing children during the grand opening celebration. This is where I learned what real love looks like, he had said, getting down on one knee in front of everyone. It looks like patience, like believing in someone's dreams, like sitting in the back row of recitals and waiting for hearts to heal. Now, standing before their gathered loved ones, Marcus and Sarah exchanged vows they had written themselves. Sarah, Marcus began, his voice steady but full of emotion. Before I met you, I thought I had everything figured out. Success was a number in a bank account, and love was a business transaction. You showed me that real wealth is in the smiles of children reading their first books, in the tears of joy when a family reunites, in the quiet strength of someone fighting for their dreams. Sarah squeezed his hands, tears sparkling in her eyes as she spoke her vows. Marcus, you never tried to rescue me. Instead, you stood beside me, supporting my dreams while I found my own way. You taught me that love isn't about grand gestures or solving someone's problems. It's about believing in each other, growing together, and building something meaningful that's bigger than ourselves. In the audience, Victoria Chen sat quietly next to her new husband, watching her ex-husband's face shine with genuine happiness. She had come to realize that her warnings to Sarah had been wrong. Marcus hadn't changed because Sarah was different. He had changed because he was finally ready to be different. The ceremony was brief but meaningful. When the chaplain pronounced them husband and wife, the children from the center cheered and threw rose petals, their enthusiasm making everyone laugh. The reception was held at the community center, Sarah's choice, which Marcus had wholeheartedly supported. The elegant space that usually hosted after-school programs and community meetings had been transformed into a warm, festive gathering place. Linda Thompson danced with her new son-in-law, her eyes twinkling. You know, she said, when Sarah first told me about the billionaire who kept coming to the restaurant, I was worried. But you proved that money doesn't define a person. Choices do. Later, as Sarah and Marcus shared their first dance, Emma approached them with James and his girlfriend. Dad, Emma said, we have something to tell you both. James continued, we've been talking, and we want to get involved with the center's education program. Emma can teach piano, and I can help with the sports activities during college breaks. Sarah hugged them both, while Marcus looked on with pride. His children had grown into thoughtful young adults, and he knew Sarah's influence had played a major part in that transformation. As the evening wound down, Marcus and Sarah stood on the center's roof garden, another of Sarah's dreams that had become reality. The New York skyline sparkled around them, but they were focused on each other. Happy? Sarah asked, though she knew the answer. Marcus pulled her close. You know, for years I lived in a penthouse overlooking the city, but I never really saw its beauty. Now I see it everywhere, in community centers, in hospital recovery rooms, in small chapels, and most of all, in the eyes of the woman who taught me how to truly live. Sarah leaned into his embrace, thinking about their journey, from a dropped phone and a chocolate souffle to this moment. They had proven that true love doesn't see bank accounts or social status, it sees hearts, dreams, and the courage to build something beautiful together. And that was worth more than all the billions in the world.